Roughly 3 weeks later, after the lawyer had delivered the photos to the ambassador, Gianfranco Facco Bonetti reached out to Pavel Astachov once again. Evidently, the ambassador sent the portrait photos received from our lawyer to Italy, and confirmation of the authenticity of this masterpiece came from there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made sense to proceed to substantive negotiations. Ambassador Facco Bonetti scheduled the next round of negotiations with our lawyer, which took place in the second half of January 2005. Shortly before the approaching negotiation date, we received from the French Ministry of Culture the certificate we had requested, allowing us to export the portrait of Benvenuto Cellini beyond the national borders of France. These details with dates are crucial to understand the essence of the conflict that unfolded in diplomatic form before escalating to arson, property seizure, and the destruction of our lives. So we obtained the French export certificate, granting us the right to take the painting out of the country. For me personally, the positive decision of the French Ministry of Culture to issue this document was entirely unexpected, and moreover, it seemed strange to me. French regulations, established by law, are generally quite reasonable and logical. In France, every owner of a valuable work of art must apply for an export certificate. Upon receiving the application, the Ministry of Culture has 3 options within 4 months. Option 1. If the Ministry of Culture experts deem that the value and cost of the painting do not exceed €150,000, then the applicant receives a simple letter stating that the certificate is unnecessary. Usually they write to the applicant in French, "Cher monsieur, votre demande est sans objet. Dear sir, your request is irrelevant." Option 2. If the Ministry of Culture experts, upon receiving photographs, a questionnaire, and a description of the painting, determine that the work has a value exceeding €150,000, they are obliged to personally inspect the work. Following the inspection, a certificate is issued, or the third option occurs. After this inspection, the applicant is denied a certificate because the painting is recognized as national heritage of France and the state has the right to purchase it. In other words, the Ministry of Culture has no right to issue an export certificate without the experts from the Louvre Museum inspecting the painting. This is excluded by the rules and the law. Once again, to reiterate, according to the rules, if permission for export is granted, it means that the painting is valued at over €150,000 and it has been inspected by Louvre experts. However, in our case, we received the certificate by mail and there was no inspection of the painting. In fact, we were satisfied with the ministry's decision, but just in case, I wrote a letter to the Ministry of Culture informing them that we received the certificate in violation of the procedural rules. We received no response to this letter. I exercise such caution because exporting the painting out of France without documents or with improper documents is a criminal offense. Anticipating, I will say that employees of the French Ministry of Culture committed this offense twice for the same masterpiece. Later, after 10 years, to conceal their mistake in issuing the certificate, they repeated it. Here's how it happened. In 2004, when we applied for the export certificate, there had not yet been any scientific examination of the portrait. In the autumn of 2004, we only sent a simple verbal description of the portrait to the Ministry of Culture, along with amateur photographs attached to the application. I knew that the Louvre experts themselves should have appointed the necessary examinations during the inspection. That was our logic. Anyway, there had been no examination of this portrait at the time of the first application. Therefore, 10 years later, in 2014, when all necessary investigations had been conducted and the expert opinions were ready, I once again sent a request to the Ministry of Culture for the certificate. To this request, I attached all available expertise and analysis results. In 2014, I acted as if no certificate had been issued in 2005, and this request for the document was occurring for the first time. In this case, the Ministry of Culture should have refused to issue us the certificate for at least 2 reasons. Firstly, the export certificate of the Ministry of Culture is issued only once because it has no expiry date. Therefore, considering that the certificate had already been issued in 2005, the Ministry of Culture had the right to issue us only a duplicate, but by no means another original. And secondly, considering the existence of portrait examinations conducted by the best laboratories and experts in France, the Ministry of Culture was obliged to inspect the portrait and appoint a commission to recognize it as national heritage of France. However, against all expectations and contrary to all rules, the Ministry of Culture again issued us the same document. Literally, in 2015, they issued us another original certificate for the self-portrait of Benvenuto Cellini, not a duplicate of the first, and the still valid certificate. It's like issuing two different driver's licenses to a person which are independent of each other. Moreover, the ministry staff again did not inspect the painting and sent this certificate by mail just as they did 10 years ago. There are few departments and divisions in the Louvre. I have experience interacting with several of them. I have processed similar documents quite often, and always, without exception, in the drawing department, a commission consisting of several people examined the drawing. Here is, for example, the certificate of the 17th century masterpiece from our family collection. In my last visit to Louvre, I counted 9 people in this commission, which examined the drawing. This commission consists of the highest management of the department, representatives of the Ministry of Culture, and expert curators of the museum. In the department of Baroque and Rococo painting, all works declared for export were also mandatory to be examined. Moreover, if necessary, Louvre experts went to the location where the painting was placed to avoid transporting it. However, in the department of Renaissance painting, there was some unhealthy atmosphere, in my opinion. The employees of this department and the Ministry of Culture simply did not follow the legal procedure. Surprised by these practices, I asked the experts in the drawing department what they thought of the activities of their colleagues from the Renaissance painting department. The Louvre employees themselves replied with irritation that this department had a bad reputation. I inquired and learned that the expert who did not inspect the Cellini portrait when issuing the certificate was Madame Cécile Scagliere, and the responsible employee of the Ministry of Culture was Madame Martine Cambien. Later, in 2023, employees of the Italian Ministry of Culture, seeing a copy of the French export certificate, reasonably assumed that we had provided them with a fake document because logically, such a certificate could not have been issued by French colleagues under any circumstances. Benvenuto Cellini was too important for France. He had got a French nobility from his friend, the King Francis, and his self-portrait could not be allowed to leave the country. Therefore, in 2023, officials from the Italian Ministry of Culture turned to the Italian Carabinieri to verify the authenticity of the French documents. From the perspective of Italian law, importing works of art into Italian territory without proper French export documents is also a criminal offense, punishable by imprisonment for a term of 3 to 6 years. The Carabinieri naturally confirmed the authenticity of our documents. However, I believe that the day is approaching when some employees of the Louvre and the French Ministry of Culture, as part of an organized group of villains, will be held criminally responsible for their actions in accordance with the law. It is quite likely that this is not simply a matter of negligence on the part of an individual employee, as this document is issued by a group of officials and experts. Therefore, they bear collective and personal responsibility. So, in January 2005, the second round of negotiations took place between my lawyer, Pavel Astachov, and Ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta, Facco Bonetti, at the Embassy of Italy in Moscow. It was during these negotiations that the dramatic events occurred, paving the way for the future war. At the negotiating table in the Embassy of Italy were 3 men opposite my lawyer, one of whom was Ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta and Italy, Mr. Facco Bonetti. I do not know who the other individuals were. During the negotiations, Pavel Astachov, on his own initiative, informed his partners that the self-portrait of Benvenuto Cellini now had an export certificate. However, Astachov did not have copies of this document on hand. Therefore, the Italians repeatedly asked Astachov in surprise whether France had indeed granted permission to export this work. In other words, at the beginning of the negotiations, the Italians did not even assume that the portrait had proper export documents. And this is very important information because neither the Italian state nor other official entities would negotiate the acquisition of a painting that did not have documents yet. Imagine the legal collision if we had agreed to transfer the portrait to Italy, and this had happened without permission to export from France. Italy still claims the return of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpieces from the Louvre, and France bristles at these demands. There is no need for a new conflict between Italy and France over works of art. Meanwhile, negotiations were ongoing at that very moment, which meant only one thing. Supposedly, these negotiations were conducted on behalf of Italy by private individuals, or rather, an organized community, such as the Sovereign Order of Malta. I will discuss these negotiations and the subsequent events in the next video. We are only at the beginning of the story, and the climax is still very far away. Subscribe to my channel, dear friends. It will only get more interesting from here.